we have to start, as we knew we would, in Columbus, Ohio. And that is where the Michigan Wolverines and the Ohio State Buckeyes played ostensibly a playoff game to determine the Big Ten champ. The Big Ten East champ. Next week, that team will win the championship and to determine who's going to the playoff. And, Michigan just steamrolled them. Michigan 45, Ohio State 23. I have a cavalcade of takes from this game, but I will turn it over to you, Casey Smith, because I feel like this is deja vu. You felt this coming all year. You thought it would come, and it has come. Michigan kills Ohio State in the horseshoe.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. It was an absolute curb stomping. And the biggest takeaway, which I know you'll have on your list, and we'll continue to talk about it as well, is that everybody on the planet, and for good reason, assumed that if Blake Corum wasn't going to play in this game, that Michigan wouldn't have a chance to win. And when I say everybody on the planet, everyone on the planet who was on Ohio State. The biggest thing that we saw today was two things that everyone was trying to argue against me and anybody who was on Michigan's side this week, is that J.J. McCarthy is not near as bad of a quarterback as everybody tried to say that he was, because he had a hell of a day, and he hadn't played like that all season, but he had a crazy day. And then two, Donovan Edwards is still really fucking good too. And all year he was second behind Blake Corum, but it was a 1-2 situation with them, and he had over 200 yards. So with JJ McCarthy having the day that he did and Donovan Edwards picking up the slack where Blake Corum couldn't play, it was a recipe for disaster, because Ohio State had zero answers when both of them got going. And those were things that people thought were impossible, and they happened.
I want to be careful how I say respond to the McCarthy thing, because I'm going to be effusive in my praise for Michigan. You can't not be after watching them win that game. I want to start by deconstructing a couple things you said, and that begins when you said it wasn't even close. And that's the rub, because it was very close for a half, and then they went into the half, and one coaching staff came out balls ablazing, ready to fucking win a game, looking like they would shit down the other team's neck. And one coaching staff and team came out at halftime thinking, oh, I hope we're in this game till the end. Oh, I hope we don't mess up. Oh, I hope we don't go for it on 4th and 3 here and ruin our chances. Ohio State and Michigan went into the locker room. Ohio State was winning 20-17. When they came out, Michigan was 100 times better than Ohio State. That is a coaching issue. That is a coaching problem. Ohio State was scared. They were scared of Michigan. Now, go ahead. You can answer that.
At the end of the day, it wasn't close for 4 quarters. Like, I
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
I know, but when I said it wasn't close by the end of the game. There was, when I picked Michigan to win this game, I
wasn't disagreeing with you at all. I was expounding on your point. But here's the thing, and here's the biggest deal of all. This game today, Michigan 45, Ohio State 23, is so much bigger and more important than the very game last year. It is way bigger, way more important, way bigger of a stamp, because last year they beat them at home. Last year they beat them playing the way Michigan plays. Last year they finally won to at least save some face in the rivalry. But 365 days later, can you do it in Columbus? Can you do it again? One time can happen, anytime. When you do it twice, and when you walk into their building and and take your foot and drag it across their face in their yard, and you plant your flag on their logo, now you've done something. One time is just a game. 2 times is a new normal. And that is exactly what Michigan did today. They said, you know what, we beat you last year, but this is how it's going to be from now on. You know how? Bam, we rubber stamped this. We beat your ass. And we didn't just beat you. We didn't just win the game. We embarrassed you. We took your soul. We took your heart. In front of God and everybody, they took their soul today.
And they not only took their soul and embarrassed them, they did it in a way that most people that were on Ohio State thought was impossible. At one point, Michigan had 1 rushing yard well into the game, 1 rushing yard, and was still leading the game. And it wasn't like it was 3-0. Now, in the second half, Donovan Edwards obviously went crazy, but Michigan rubbed everything all over Ohio State for a half of football and well into the 3rd quarter without having a running game going at all.
That's a very good point. They did it until Donovan Edwards broke those 2 long runs. they did it playing like Ohio State's brand of football. They did it throwing the ball down the field. They said, okay, we don't have Blake Corum. We're going to try the run. It ain't working. And we're going to – and here's where I want to come back in on J.J. McCarthy, because I don't believe today was some magic elixir that makes him a good quarterback. I think he's fine. But today was so much more than just him, because the scheme, the coaching, all three of his touchdown passes – no, I should say that. Two of his touchdown passes, the two long ones, were to wide open receivers, were to receivers that were schemed open. The first one was a pass in the flats, and the guy made a play. And the second two, and J.J. McCarthy still has to make these throws, and he did a great job of making them, but the coaching staff put it on a tee for him, and they wore Ohio State's ass out. Jim Knowles, you were brought to stop this. You were brought to do something about it, and you didn't.
And Michigan's offensive line did such a good job today to give JJ time. And there were clearly some passes that were questionable early on, but once that game got rolling, the offensive line, who is normally the unsung hero of a lot of these games, they played their asses off. And then once Donovan Edwards got rolling, it was just, they couldn't cover it. Ohio State didn't know what to do because, like you said, Michigan was playing Ohio State's type offense, but Michigan all year has been proving that, if they have the running game and they can get the yards on the ground, they don't need JJ McCarthy to do a whole lot. And they have it. They needed him to do it today, and he did it. And he had 263 yards and 3 touchdowns. And everybody was sitting back like, oh, well, if JJ McCarthy is the reason they're going to win this game, it's not going to happen. Well, he was the reason that they won that game for most of the game, because the offensive line gave him the time to do it.
Yeah, I thought without Blake Corum, Michigan had no chance, and didn't matter at all. Didn't matter at all. Other players stepped up. Jack, I'm about to get on Ohio State's ass. If you want to interject anything on Michigan right here, here's your chance.
No, I think everyone's surprised. What a performance, specifically from the defense. It felt like in the past, when Ohio State played Michigan, those wide receivers would be wide open every time over the middle. Like Dwayne Haskins would drop back and boom, 15-yard pass. It seemed, at least on 85% of these plays, those defensive backs were in the ass, pause, of the Michigan, of the Ohio State wide receivers. Like, they were right there. I'm not smart enough from a football schemes perspective to provide why, but whatever they were doing worked. They were throwing slants. There was times that CJ Stroud got lucky that he didn't throw a pick six. I think there was one when it was like a slant over the middle where a linebacker dropped back in the coverage. The safety came up in the corner. It was almost like a triple team. If the ball was thrown a little bit lower, that linebacker McGregor would have taken it for a pick six. That didn't happen in the past 8 to 10 years of Ohio State and Michigan. The Ohio State quarterback would come out and he would have all day to throw. And he would throw it 15 yards. They go down the field, scored 56 points. That didn't happen today.
Well, and Jack, and even when they did have those moments, I mean, how many drop passes did Ohio State have today? And I know we're going to talk about how bad they played in certain moments, but there were multiple passes that wide receivers dropped and passes from CJ Stroud that absolutely should have been caught, that were major game changers. I mean, for the lack of better terms, like it was crazy. You don't see that happen in the Ohio State as of late. And we saw that. So then you add the fact that Michigan's defense was up their ass the entire time. It was a recipe for disaster.
I think it comes back. It starts at the top. I think Michigan's players played like they were absolutely obsessed with winning this game, like they would kill themselves to win this game. And Ohio State players played as if they were hoping to stay in this game long enough to win it in the end. And
which is crazy because of last year.
Okay, no, stop there.
Okay.
I'm glad you said that, because as big of a day as this is for Michigan, this could be equally as big of a day for Ohio State. You lose once, all right, okay, you lost. They had to win at some point, but we get them in our place next year. And for 364 days, they had to hear about that school up north beating them, and had to hear about them running it down their throat. And they had to watch them in the playoff, and they had to eat that. They had to suck on that. They had to live in that for 364 days. And then they show up in the horseshoe on Saturday and nothing. They show up and they just look like they're going through the motions. Oh, they were fine in the first half when nothing was in danger. But when times got tough, when times got hard, and when winning time came up, Ohio State looked like their players didn't belong on the same field as Michigan. And that starts at the very, very top. If you are Ohio State's coach, you are going to be privy to a level of talent that only Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, a couple of teams are privy to. You get that by virtue of being Ohio State's coach. You didn't build that. And Ryan Day has that talent. And he has two jobs: beat Michigan, win a national title. And he's about to go 0 for 2 again. He's not on the hot seat because he went 11-1, but he's about to be uncomfortable. He's about to be uncomfortable as hell. Ohio State, make no mistake, Ohio State has more talent than Michigan, period. Where was it? Where was it?
Not only where was it, Brandon, there were multiple times in that game that the Ohio State team was completely undisciplined. That headbutting well into the sideline for no reason to get unsportsmanlike conduct was a massive change in that game. There were multiple penalties that Ohio State had that was just, they were head scratchers. Like, what is going on with this team? They were undisciplined. They didn't look like they wanted to play in the second half. He was getting out coached. And the joke of, oh, Ryan Day was born on third base, a lot of people kind of poo-pooed that and said, well, he's continued to have the success. But what Ohio State fans expect him to do, he's not doing. And then you add the sloppiness of those penalties and the sloppiness of just unnecessary shit that they didn't need to be doing in the biggest game of the year against their rival who beat them to death last year. It was, as an Ohio State fan, you have to sit back and you have to say, what the fuck is going on with this team?
I mentioned how I thought the coaches really did a good job scheming J.J. McCarthy, some successful plays, got him into the game, and then he took off. I know Ohio State coaches did the opposite for C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud is a down-the-field thrower, and I know Michigan's defense is very good, but you knew they were going to be very good. You got to figure out a way. They had the one play to Marvin Harrison, the fade route for a touchdown where he threw a dot, and they never, ever, ever tried that again. And also in the second half, when they're leading 20-17 to start the half, and they fall behind 24-20, they got into a couple of situations. I believe it was 4th and 3 at midfield. Then it was 4th and 5 or 4th and 6 at the 43-yard line. And they punted both times. And both times led to long, successful drives. You are Ohio goddamn State. You have the most talent in this game. You're the one that has to be hungry to win this game. Why are you just sitting back and resting on your laurels and saying, well, I hope we get the ball back and then we'll go get them? No. Ryan Day got his ass out-coached by a mile today. By a mile. It was a coach, Jim Harbaugh, who has built this team patiently and solidly and has a great foundation. And when they get to big games, I know what I'm getting out of Jim Harbaugh. And Ryan Day, this don't look good.
Well, and the second time that they decided to punt, they gained 20 yards by punting it. Why not go for it at that point when you know exactly what's going to happen if you give Michigan the ball back? It wasn't early enough in the game where they were just going to force J.J. McCarthy to have to throw and then hope that the ground game can't get going. By that point in the game, they knew exactly what Michigan was doing. They had been doing it all fucking game. So the fact that they decided to punt there and gain a whole 20 yards and then watch Michigan march right down the field, again, as an Ohio State fan, if you're sitting there watching that, you have to think, why was that the decision at this point in the game when the game wasn't out of control yet?
So I got one more, and this is, I go at coaches a lot, I go at fans a lot. I rarely go at players, but this needs to be said. When things are good and the other team is massively out-talented, like C.J. Stroud runs into a lot when he's playing Indiana, when he's playing Illinois, when he's playing Michigan State, when he's playing teams that aren't going to bother him, boy, it's a thing to watch. It is a beauty and a joy to behold. He's going to throw that ball for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, and everything is great. But in the second half of that game today, when things got tight, when things got rough, and this happened last year too, when things were on the line and when somebody had to step up in scarlet and gray and make a play, he didn't. He didn't get close. He did not get close. Now, adversity is not something that befalls the Ohio State quarterback situation a lot. But in both times we've seen adversity come up to C.J. Stroud in the last 2 years, Michigan has walked out of there smiling, and he has not made that play. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. He's not. but he didn't go get the plays today. And if you want to win a Heisman, which that's out the window, you got to go get the plays. And he did not do it. Jack, am I way off there?
What Jack just said is 100% correct.
What did he say? I was too.
I said his body language was awful. He kind of looked like, and Casey probably picked up on it more because like women just read body language so much better than men. CJ Stroud kind of like just looked like the guy at the end where it's like he didn't, not that I'm not going to say he didn't care. I think he saw the result happening and said to himself, all right, whatever. Like I'm a top 5 pick, top 10 pick. Yeah, like I didn't end up beating Michigan. It's not the end of the world. Like whatever.
He was like a fighter, didn't want to be hit no more.
Yeah, he was kind of, it was like, he almost is like and it happens a lot in fighting. He's almost like a champion that it's like he's won the championship so many times. And then this challenger is just here and he's just like, all he thinks about is beating him. And he just took his, like you said, took his soul from him. Like
you're right, Jack. Women do pick up on that shit very, very easily. And the biggest stark contrast of what you just said about CJ Stroud was what JJ McCarthy was doing the entire game. Because even when the game was still close, even when they weren't blowing them out yet, JJ McCarthy was playing with a fire up his ass. And then obviously at the end of the game, you saw the wave, you saw
all the Michigan's players were. All the Michigan's players
right,
were playing
but it's like there was something going on with CJ Stroud. And, you know, he is a great quarterback. We know that. He will probably have a very good NFL career. But all season I've sat here and multiple people have sat in front of him and said, CJ Stroud just doesn't look like he wants to win the Heisman. Yes, he has great numbers. Marvin Harrison Jr., by the way, unbelievable. Like he is going to have one hell of a career. That guy can catch basically anything. However, there were moments throughout the season where I would give CJ Stroud a little bit of shit and Ohio State fans would come flying in like, oh, what are you talking about? It's the best offense in the country. It's the best quarterback in the country. When you have the opportunity to not only beat your rival, but to put the Heisman conversation to bed, to rest, he didn't seem like he wanted to do it. And meanwhile, you've got JJ McCarthy, who's been told by everybody and their mom how bad of a quarterback he is, waving in your face by the end of the game. Just a bad look for CJ Stroud across the board.
Yeah, it was. It was a bad day for Ohio State. It was a reality. It's reality now. Last year is one time. It's a fluke. Twice, and in your place, it is reality. This rivalry has flipped. It has completely changed, and Michigan now owns it.
Michigan now owns it. And before the season, when we made our predictions, and of course, it's always fun to dance on everybody when you're right. It's horrible when everybody dances on you when you're wrong. But today, when I tweeted out the video that we had from August, when I said, well, it's a 2 quarterback system, clearly that wasn't the case because they stuck with JJ McCarthy when they needed to. It was more of a 2 running back situation all year. But this Michigan team, and I could eat crow because in this calendar year, we've seen what happened with Michigan in the playoff. But the way that Michigan played today, having to not only figure out what to do without their best running back, have another running back have 200 yards, but have a quarterback actually step up against an Ohio State defense that did get better this year. They did. They clearly weren't great, but they got better from last year. This Michigan team feels like it's more built for the playoff than last year's. And that's why if you are a Michigan fan, you should take it and say, okay, we got our dicks kicked in by Georgia earlier this year. This isn't the same Michigan team.
We'll see about that. I think I wouldn't have any problem with calling them co-favorites with Georgia. I certainly think they should be 1 and 2, and you can put them in any order. I think they're going to play for a national title, those 2 teams. I do disagree with something you just said, and it's not something you said, it's something everybody said. When it has been said ad nauseum, Ohio State's defense is better this year. Was it? Like at no point in this season did they really have to prove that. The dirty secret about the Big Ten is you got to beat Michigan and you got to beat Penn State and you're golden. And they beat Penn State, but Penn State scored 30 points? Penn State, whose offense isn't great, scored 30 points. Nobody else on that schedule scares you from an offensive perspective. And Ohio State was able to win games. But when they got to nut cutting time today, like it's the second half of the biggest game of the year, and Donovan Edwards looked shocked to be just on the open field twice. And JJ McCarthy's throwing against air. Did they get better, or their schedule just make them look like they got better?
That's a fair point, because you're right. I mean, they didn't have to get tested when they did finally get tested by an offense that was supposed to be one dimensional. That's, again, JJ McCarthy didn't have to do anything all year. He just had to be serviceable and allow the ground game to get going. They did not look better. I guess for some reason this game, and I realized that 365 days ago, Michigan did the same thing to Ohio State and kicked the shit out of them. This one felt so much worse because it wasn't Columbus, as we've mentioned, but there was just something about the way that Michigan just tore them apart. Every stretch, just every single time they had the ball down the stretch, it was just like, what Ohio State team is this? And I think it's because CJ Stroud and the offense just wasn't who we expected them to be. But I don't know. I mean, Michigan just feels like it's a better team than last year. And I know Ev was sitting there on the stream, and the stream was hilarious and tons of people watching. I get that. But Ev was sitting there saying, well, we're a better team than Michigan. Well, you might have better talent, but you can't watch what just happened today and say that Ohio State's a better team than Michigan on either side of the ball.
Coaching is a significant part of a team, and Ohio State's coaching isn't in the same stratosphere as Michigan's coaching. That's just a fact.